In the underground chambers of Lomar, Teska almost lost count how many mind melds she attempted on the slaves hanging in suspended animation. Even restricting herself to those who seemed relatively healthy, according to tricorder readings, it was an exercise in futility. She found brain activity, subconscious functions such as breathing and heartbeat, plus a few basic emotions. There were memory fragments, but they seemed false and removed from reality like half-remembered dreams. Her breakthrough came on the 22nd subject. It was a human female. As soon as Teska inserted her hand into the slimy innards of the bag and touched the face of the blonde woman, she felt a slight shock. Teska signaled to Oswald, the medical officer with her. "Begin recording." Then she began relating their thoughts aloud. "You are being held prisoner. Do not be alarmed. You are safe now. You are in suspended animation and our minds are melding. We need information to help you. My name is Teska. Who are you?" Linda Feeney. Linda, this is crucial. What is your job here? What project were you most recently working on? Engineer, 2nd class. I'm working on the portable emitter. The small one. The Genesis emitter? Yes. A small version for tests. Also for the backup plan. How many of these devices did you make? A few. I saw others working on them. And where are the portable devices? They're in the laboratory. One is in the field. Torna 4. Can you save me? Teska nodded. We will try, Linda. The Vulcan broke off the mind meld, letting Linda Feeney drift back into her troubled slumber. Teska stepped down the ladder to where Oswald waited. Oswald was troubled. But sir, we haven't found any portable devices like that. Teska fixed her colleague with a baleful gaze. But we were not the first ones here. I must inform Admiral Nechayev immediately. After hearing the Vulcan's report, Admiral Nechayev frowned deeply and rose from the desk in her ready room. This coincides with another report I received. The large moon of Meldrar 1 had sudden and inexplicable plant growth over 12,000 square meters of land. And we're talking about an arid wasteland. Nobody knows anything about it except that a shuttlecraft and a few passengers from a freighter are also missing. The Admiral sat back at her desk and began working at her computer terminal. Engineer Feeney said there was a device on a planet named Torna 4. The freighter which went to Meldrar 1. It came from Torna 4. Teska cocked an eyebrow. That is near Bajor, if memory serves me. We must cease operations here and go to investigate. Nechayev looked up with alarm. We've got work to do here. Lives to save. It is a logical assumption, Admiral, that unknown parties have a portable Genesis device and tested it on a moon. It is also a logical assumption that these unknown individuals obtained a shuttlecraft and have escaped, perhaps to go into hiding. They are not Romulans. Romulans would not test the device in Federation space, where the results could so easily be identified. Nechayev groaned. No, I suppose not. You're married to a Romulan. Do you have any contacts there? Teska shook her head. The whereabouts of my mate are unknown, and I trust no other Romulans. We must investigate this ourselves and do so immediately. Nechayev stared at her computer screen. The best I can do is report all of this to Starfleet and ask for guidance. You're dismissed. Nechayev looked up from her desk, scowling, but she had to admit the truth. Teska was right. and it would shake the Admiralty to their core when she told them that the Romulans had possession of Genesis. And there was nothing she could do about it, not while she orbited this dead planet, struggling to keep scores of brain-dead patients alive. Piloted by Cassie Jackson, the small shuttlecraft swooped downward into a landing approach. The 5 passengers looked at Chelok suspiciously, except for the Vulcan, whose expression hadn't changed in several hours of warp-speed flight. 2 specks on the ground turned into 2 Bajorans, a fat one and a thin one, who covered their eyes from the blowing sand as the shuttlecraft settled to the ground. As the passengers stepped from the craft, a beaming Prylar Yorka greeted each one. Chelok and Cassie stepped out of the craft and leaned against it with their arms crossed. The Ferengi wanted to take over the presentation, but he knew this was Yorka's show. When it came down to asking for cash and support, he would perform that onerous task. To him, that was the important part of the ceremony. General Mira came to the point.
All right, Yorka. You've got us here. Now what?
The monk turned to his waiting acolyte.
Fetch the orb.
The dour Bajoran acolyte nodded and hustled into a tent. A moment later he emerged, holding the familiar metal box in his hands. With reverence, he handed it to Prylar Yorka. Vedic Zane perused the gleaming box.
That doesn't look like any Ark I've ever seen.
Minister Gatrick spoke up.
Do we look at it one at a time?
Yorka shook his head.
No, this isn't the kind of orb one gazes at in quiet contemplation. The orb of life is more of an active orb, as you will see.
Yorka opened the container and pressed the buttons. When a blazing wall of green flame consumed the barren land and the wind began to howl, while the sky darkened with furious clouds, the observers clustered together nervously. Minister Gatrick screamed over the wind.
This is an abomination!
The general shouted.
No! We must have it!
The Vulcan calmly pulled out a pad and began to take notes. With a satisfied grin on his face, Prylar Yorka walked back to join his guests, and Chelok jumped into the conversation.
Let's step into the shuttlecraft, where we can talk terms away from all this noise. We have immediate needs for cash.
The Vulcan reached into his bag and pulled out a thick ingot of gold-pressed platinum, which he promptly handed to Chelok. There is more where that came from. The Ferengi smiled at the tall, noble Vulcan.
I think I like you best of all.
Yorka motioned to Chelok to follow him away from the others.
A private word with you, Chelok. I didn't have a chance to tell you, but while you were collecting our guests, we inspected the orb and found the power supply had weakened.
The Ferengi blinked in surprise.
Well then, how did you make it work?
That was the replicate we used. Chelok rubbed his hands together.
That is good news. But we don't want every household on Bajor to have an orb of life.
With a doubtful look on his face, the Prylar glanced at the teeming forest sprouting miraculously from barren sand only a few meters away. Monstrous black trees now towered in the sky.
Chelok, I just wish we knew more about that thing.
Chelok nodded.
Let's take the Vulcan with us. He has money. He doesn't make any demands, and he seems smart.
Yorka shook his head.
But he's associated with a criminal element. Precisely. A Vulcan criminal. Who could be more trustworthy than that?
In the doorway of her quarters on the Enterprise, Susie Ogawa gazed in wonder and joy at the tall figure standing there.
Daddy! The red-haired human who was wearing a hospital gown bent down to hug the 6-year-old. Yes, Susie. Daddy's come home. But you mustn't tell anyone I've come home. Not even Mama. Because I'm on a secret mission, and I'm leaving again very soon. So promise not to tell anyone, or they'll be mad at me and they won't let me see you until I'm all done with my assignment. Susie nodded bravely through her gathering tears. Okay, Daddy. Her father stepped to the door. After glancing both ways down the corridor, he tousled her wavy black hair, then strode swiftly away. Captain Picard leaned forward in his command chair. Warp drive on my mark. Away from the rift. Now! The Enterprise extended into a gleaming diamond of light, just as the blackness reached out with grasping tentacles, absorbing everything into its gaping, destructive maw. Horrible, unspeakable creatures swirled outward from the massive rift, cavorting like the demons of Hades in the void of space. Data reported on the ops console. We have escaped in time, Captain. I'm the Romulan ships. Unknown, Captain. Sensors are inoperative. Communications are impaired. Radiation is beyond measurable levels. The captain glanced worriedly at the view screen. I hope they saw it in time. A few moments later, Dr. Beverly Crusher asked Picard to come to sickbay, where he found Deanna Troi stretched out unconscious on an examination table. Doctor, any idea what caused this? It seemed to occur at the same time that the anomaly expanded and forced us to go to warp. But I have no real proof that the two are related. Her condition has stabilized. I prefer to let her sleep and come out of it on her own. The Antosian, Raynor Slevin, strolled into the examination area. Crusher fixed him with the doctor's gaze of disapproval. And where have you been, Lieutenant? Oh, just taking a walk. Picard nodded to Slevin. You seem fully recovered. The Antosian slapped his broad chest and grinned. Never felt better, Captain. And I'm ready to get back to work. I'll have Commander Riker go over your file. See where we can best utilize you. And, Doctor, keep me posted about Troy's condition. Half an hour later, Deanna Troi sat up in her bed and glanced around at the familiar faces in sickbay, including Beverly Crusher and Alyssa Ogawa. Her mind felt as if she had had a lobotomy. Looking around at people she knew well, she couldn't sense their emotions. I feel lousy. What happened to me? Crusher smiled with relief. We're hoping you can tell us. Troi nodded, although her recollections were very fuzzy. I remember being in my office, and then a blackness came over me. It was like... Do you remember when we were called to Gemworld a year or so ago? An interdimensional rift was destroying the planet. I get that same feeling, an overwhelming sense of dread. Only then, I sensed an intelligence on the other side. This time, it's mindless, chaotic. It's too much of a coincidence not to be related. But strange creatures were not pouring out of that other rift like we've seen them here. Ogawa frowned. We saw some radiation from the Gemworld rift, but not like this. Plus, these recent anomalies have occurred all along the path of the Genesis wave, while the other rift was localized. The counselor started to rise from her bed. The Genesis wave. That's the difference this time. And I may not be the only one who's mentally affected by this. Crusher nodded gravely. I'll keep my eye on everyone. On a blustery night, dust clattered like ancient ammunition against the corrugated metal of an ugly building on Torna 4. A Romulan named Jarrett stood outside the communal transporter platform in Celestial Square, watching two brawny humans and two stocky Deltans emerge from the open-air archway. They had Starfleet security written all over them. Jarrett almost reached for his communicator, but he realized that the new arrivals might be intercepting his signals. For several days, he and another Romulan had searched in vain for the Bajoran monk who had run off with the portable device. But how had Starfleet known to come to Torna 4? Did the Federation already possess the missing emitter? Was Prylar Yorka working for them the whole time? Jarrett knew his career was finished. But as he slipped into the shadows, he knew he still had his associate to save. From the pilot seat, Cassie Jackson looked back at the cabin of the shuttlecraft, where there was one calm Vulcan face amid several indignant ones. Prylar Yorka nodded at the Vulcan.
You are right in one respect. We must find out more about the orb of life from the Romulans. How it works. How to program it. Right now, we can't use either the original or the copy without recharging the fuel cells.
Chellock rose to his feet and paced the narrow aisle. The Vulcans' plan was risky, but they were at a crossroads with this thing. They had a secret bank account that was filling up nicely, yet they would need more information before they could really control the orb of life. Chellock looked at the Vulcan.
But how are we going to find a Romulan shuttlecraft and capture hardcore Romulan operatives?
The Vulcan calmly responded.
Begin by thinking logically. They know more about the orb than we do, because they were chasing after it before we even knew it existed. They are looking for you, Prylar, and the last thing they expect is for you to come after them. I have a plan to capture all of them without firing a beam or incurring danger. If you would all face forward for a moment while I change my clothes.
When he told them to turn back around, the noble Vulcan had turned himself into a sneering Romulan. He was even wearing a disruptor, and strapped to his back was a small yellow box. Chellock grinned.
Now that's impressive. What are you, really? What I am is a thief. Bacchus sent me to see your object, learn about it, and protect it. And that's what I intend to do. During this operation, you can call me Regimal.
Regimal turned to Cassie, who was at the shuttlecraft controls.
Now listen. Torna 4 has 3 shuttlecraft hangars where you can get repairs and service. Go to the one on the eastern outskirts of the city. It's called Dinky's Dry Dock. Land outside in the desert and let us walk in. You can always transport us back.
When the shuttlecraft came out of warp near Torna 4, it sped over the drab city and landed on the outskirts of an opaque desert near Dinky's Dry Dock. Regimal gazed out the window at the scrawny thorn bushes buffeted by the gritty wind.
Ah, this is a good night for matters of stealth. Kill your running lights. And remember, Cassie, if you have to take off without us, the rendezvous point is the Oasis of Tears on Bajor in 2 days.
She gazed trustingly into his eyes.
It'll have to be bad for me to do that.
Regimal turned to Yorka.
It's good that you will be here to help her. Those Romulans will be dead weight when they tumble off our transporter.
Yorka warned Regimal.
If you cause us to lose the orb...
Regimal cut him off.
If only the prophets had given you an instruction manual along with it.
Then Regimal turned to the Ferengi and the young Bajoran acolyte, whose name was Elon.
Shellock, are you ready?
The Ferengi nodded, hefting a Bajoran assault rifle and checking its settings.
And you, Elon?
The acolyte gulped and nodded hesitantly as he fingered the phaser on his hip. Cassie was worried that Elon might turn tail and run, but he was the only one of their assault team who really knew the town, who had lived there. She turned to Regimal.
I finished a scan of the area. It's clear outside. The nearest life forms are in the repair yard, 1.5 kilometers away. Shields are down, and I'm popping the hatch.
As the hatch sprang open, the trio jumped into the murky sandstorm. After their walk, Regimal, Chelok, and Elon passed through the security gate and entered Dinky's repair yard. They were almost blinded by all the light. Most of the wattage was focused on the 10 or so docked shuttlecraft representing a half-dozen different worlds. Robot workers sent sparks shooting into the night air. In the middle of all this, the terminal stood like a blazing mountain of light. Chelok sidled up to Regimal.
I don't think we'll be able to beam out up here with all those force fields they have as security. That's true. So we'll fly out in our new craft. And there it is.
Regimal veered in the direction of a large runabout parked in the corner of the yard. He opened his tricorder and began to take readings.
It's a Danube-class runabout, adapted for civilian use. It's probably the fastest ship in the yard, but it has no weapons in order to keep a low profile. I suspect it's the Romulans.
Then Regimal led them to the terminal, past the parts department and reception desk, straight into the raucous tavern. Hood down, Regimal darted stealthily through the revelers. His destination seemed to be the bar in the rear, and Chelok wasn't certain what he was searching for until he saw a Romulan at the bar take notice and move toward Regimal. The two Romulans seemed to connect very quickly, and when Chelok looked at them again, both of them were gone. Chelok turned to the thin and taller Bajoran acolyte.
Elon, do you see Regimal?
The Bajoran peered over the bobbing heads. No. When Chelok's comm badge beeped once, his breath caught in his windpipe.
There's the signal, Elon. Regimal needs us.
As the Ferengi and Bajoran reached the door of the tavern, two brawny humans stepped in front of them, blocking their way out.
We'd like to buy you fellas a drink.
Chelok tried to push past them.
You humans, get out of the way. We've wasted enough time in here.
With a long, muscular arm, one of the humans grabbed Chelok's thick collar and yanked him back into the tavern.
Ow!
When he landed on his feet, the two of them tried to steer him toward the back. Chelok glanced worriedly over his shoulder to see how Elon had fared. As he hoped, several Bajorans leaped to the defense of their species, and they quickly spotted Elon grappling with a much larger human. The fight escalated into a brawl, and Chelok tried to steer his abductor into the pile of swinging arms and legs. With a pang of guilt, the Ferengi kicked the big human in the shin and bolted away from him. With the other thug chasing him, he got just far enough to bang on his comm badge.
Chelok to base! Get us out of here! Help! Mayday! Request immediate transport for one!
On the shuttlecraft over a kilometer away, Cassie and Yorka looked at one another as the Ferengi's frantic voice echoed in the cabin. When she turned away and reached for the instrument panel, the monk jumped up.
Don't answer him.
The young woman turned to look at the Prylar, and she came eyeball to barrel with a Romulan disruptor.
You don't need to pull that weapon on me, Prylar. I know what you're thinking. You want to take off and ditch the others. Hey, I understand you. The fewer the better, huh?
He nodded, although he looked shaken by her blunt assessment. The young human took a breath and turned serious.
You put that weapon down right now and swear by your prophets that half of the proceeds are mine. Or we can just sit here and let the Romulans, Starfleet, or whoever find us and take everything in this craft.
Yorka nodded grimly.
All right. I swear by the prophets that half is yours.
Cassie worked her board. She lifted the shuttlecraft off the desert floor so fast that the Bajoran was hurled back into his seat. The dust storm swirled around the tiny craft as it punched its way into space. She looked at Yorka.
Hey, we both get what we want out of this. You're famous, and I'm rich. I say we find a graceful way to get out of the orb business. One last act of good versus evil, as you always say, then we scoot.
Yorka suddenly brightened.
Yes, let's keep it simple. Good versus evil. Then the orb is retired.
In Dinky's repair yard, Jarrett walked toward the brightly lit landing pads, buildings, and shuttlecraft. Nothing seemed amiss. He was hoping that his young subordinate made his way here. Jarrett ducked into a small starship and was gratified to see the other member of his squad already in the co-pilot seat. The Romulan didn't rise to greet him. Suddenly, the air in the cabin seemed stuffy, and Jarrett couldn't breathe without difficulty. He collapsed face first onto the deck, just centimeters away from his unconscious associate. The humans dragged Chelok out of the main hall of the tavern into a dimly lit room, quickly left, and locked the door. A voice hissed from the darkness.
Chelok.
The Ferengi turned in surprise.
Regimal, what are you doing here?
From a bag on his shoulder, Regimal took out a tube-like instrument and handed it to his comrade.
Here's a signal amplifier, in case I have to transport you.
Suddenly, the two brawny humans returned. Chelok whirled around to ask Regimal how he was getting out, but the Romulan was gone. Disappeared. Both humans lunged for Chelok, but suddenly there was a blur in the room, and a disembodied arm appeared from nowhere, whipping a metal pipe, and the two abductors were dispatched. Gradually, Regimal sizzled into view, looming over Chelok.
Okay, Chelok. Get back to the runabout in the yard. You won't be able to follow me. I'll be invisible and passing through walls. Keep that signal amplifier activated in case I have to beam you out.
Chelok noted the yellow device Regimal wore on his back. It blinked while he vanished. Chelok ran into the tavern where he spotted Elon being escorted by fellow Bajorans. It was up to Regimal to decide whether to rescue the Bajoran or not. Chelok had his orders. A moment later, the Ferengi stumbled into the street and ran over to the runabout. Strong hands pulled him into the cabin as the hatch closed. Stepping over two fallen Romulans, Regimal bounded into the pilot seat and tapped the instrument panel.
Take a seat, Chelok. We're not hanging around.
Out the rear viewport, Chelok saw the bright lights of Torna 4 rapidly receding into the distance, and he laughed joyfully at their daring escape. Later, while reclining in a soft passenger seat on the runabout, Chelok turned to Regimal.
So, how do you walk through walls?
When Regimal ignored his question, Jarrett, one of the bound Romulans lying on the deck, piped up.
First you become a traitor, that's how. Then you steal an interphase generator and become a common criminal.
Regimal turned around from his pilot seat.
I didn't steal it. I invented it. And I never wanted to become a criminal. Just a dissenting voice who thought we should share technology with other races, especially Vulcans. It was our own Senate who turned me into a criminal.
Regimal then told Chelok.
They all know me in the Legion of Assassins. They've all been sent to kill me a time or two, with pathetic results, as you can see. But now we'll find out what they know, and what they were searching for on that planet.
Flopping about on the deck, Jarrett scowled.
I'll never tell you a thing.
Regimal shrugged.
I captured you, and now I'll take you to someone who will extract what we need to know. My master, Bacchus.
Chelok rose and sat in the co-pilot seat beside Regimal.
Regimal, when do we rendezvous with Yorka and the shuttlecraft? We don't. They deserted us, Chelok. They ran out on us.
Chelok shook his head miserably.
All that work I put in, and there won't be any riches or fame.
Regimal looked at him thoughtfully.
I wouldn't say it's over, Chelok. A fast runabout and 2 prisoners is not a bad day's work. Captain Picard and Geordie LaForge stood in engineering, discussing the engineer's latest idea. I know, Captain, that nothing has worked so far, but that's because we're approaching this rift as a conventional body in space, which can be measured and analyzed. It can't. We need to move physically into it. If beings can come out of the rift, then we can go into it. The captain's lips thinned. We're like a village nestled in the shadow of a live volcano, which is about to erupt any second. Riker was hailing Picard. Sir, I thought you'd want to know. The Romulan ship Javlik has returned. Commander Kalina is hailing us. Picard virtually ran for the turbolift. The feeling of loss and uncertainty had been overwhelming since the rift expanded a few days ago, forcing them to flee. Commander Kalina, the blackness, the monsters, it was all related, all holding them in bondage to this place. When he stepped off the turbolift, he paused, realizing that he wasn't headed to the bridge, but to the transporter room. Picard to bridge. I'm beaming over to the Javlik. Minutes later, the captain stepped off the platform in the Romulan transporter room and saw Commander Kalina alone, waiting for him. She stared at him. Why should I care so much what happens to you? He stepped hesitantly closer to her. I don't know. I was distraught, thinking you had been killed. Suddenly, passion overwhelmed him. He wrapped his arms around her trembling body. In her ready room on the Sequoia, Admiral Nechayev scowled angrily at the Romulan listening device that Teska had found in the cavern on Lomar. We have to assume, Teska, that they know everything we've talked about, everything we've done since we arrived on Lomar. They know we've found out about them having portable Genesis emitters. She handed the listening device back to Teska. Put it back. With this device, we can feed the Romulans false information. The voice of the duty officer interrupted them. Sir, a decommissioned civilian runabout has just entered orbit, and they're hailing us. Did they give a name? Selat. Patch him through. After a moment, another voice sounded over the comm system. It was Regimal. I've got witnesses to events which may interest you, Admiral. 2 are Romulans from Torna 4, and 1 is Ferengi. I'll need security for the 2 Romulans. And by the way, I've seen it. A live demonstration. Nechayev nodded. Good work. Send us your coordinates, and we'll beam the Romulans directly to the brig. We'll meet you in the transporter room. Nechayev out. Teska frowned. When he says he's seen it, what does he mean? The Admiral answered grimly. Genesis in a suitcase. In the Sequoia's transporter room, the Romulan stepped off the platform and shook the Admiral's hand. Bacchus. Nechayev shook her head with amusement. No, you can't call me that anymore. I've retired. Nechayev began introductions. Regimal, this is Teska, my mission specialist. Teska, this is Regimal, a dissident scientist formerly of the Romulan Star Empire. Regimal turned toward the transporter platform just as a short, barrel-chested Ferengi materialized and stepped off the platform. After Regimal completed the introductions, Chelok rubbed his hands together excitedly. Let's get a bite to eat, Admiral. Then I'll tell you all about the Orb of Life. Soon, in a quiet corner of the ship's lounge, Teska and Nechayev sat in stunned silence, listening to the Ferengi tell a story between chomping mouthfuls of food. In dismay, Nechayev pushed herself away from the table. I've got a lot to do. It may be pointless, Chelok, but you will go to the rendezvous to try to meet Prylar Yorka.
Nechayev turned to Teska.
I think you and Regimal have something private to discuss. I'd like both of you to meet me in the brig in an hour.
After Nechayev led Chelok out of the lounge, Teska looked expectantly at the Romulan.
By the Admiral's remarks, am I to believe that you know my husband? His name is Hesmek, and he was...
Regimal held up his hand.
Yes, I knew him. He was also listed among the ranks of dissidents for wanting to normalize ties with the Vulcans. I know there was a secret trial and several executions after that, but I didn't see him killed. However, I included his name in a list I gave Nechayev of dissidents presumed dead, because it fit the facts. I'm sorry.
Teska rose from the table, looking a bit shaky but still impassive.
So, being married to me, a Vulcan, got him killed.
She turned and strode away. In the austere brig of the Sequoia, Jarrett and his associates stared sullenly from their cells at Nechayev, Teska, and Regimal. Suddenly, Jarrett sneered at his captors.
I'm not telling you anything.
Nechayev scowled.
So you went to Torna 4 on vacation and to take a tour of the temples? You won't even admit that you were searching for a portable Genesis emitter?
Jarrett turned away. Nechayev shrugged and whispered to her colleagues.
Play along with me.
The Admiral moved closer to Jarrett's cell.
Consider speaking of your own free will, and we'll protect you afterwards. But if we have to use a mind meld, we'll learn everything you know. Teska is a priestess on Vulcan, and she's been a master of the mind meld since she was a child. So, which one of you would like to talk to us first?
Jarrett spat at Nechayev, and the Admiral waved her hand. As soon as the force field dropped, she drilled Jarrett in the chest, and he slumped to the deck. Nechayev pointed to Jarrett.
Gentlemen, bring him along.
Regimal and the guard entered the cell, grabbed a leg apiece, and rudely dragged the Romulan across the deck toward the door. In the corridor, they were met by a puzzled medical team. Nechayev told them what to do.
He is only phaser-stunned, but I want you to give him something that will keep him unconscious for an hour or so. When we drag him back to the brig in an hour, the other one will think that we know everything already. So his resistance will be weakened, and he'll talk.
Captain Picard lay asleep in Commander Kalina's arms, and she had to squirm to crawl out from underneath him. She scurried into the adjoining room, and in a mirror, she glimpsed her pointed ears. She still couldn't get used to them, and she would be happy when she could go back to her own Elysian ears and skin color. As her door slid open, a stooped Romulan female with a streak of gray stuck her head into the room.
Is he asleep?
Kalina nodded yes.
Have you talked about Genesis?
Kalina nodded again.
Yes, and I don't believe he knows anything about it. By the way, he wants back the prototype suits to enter the rift, and I think it's a good idea. You think it's a good idea? You're just an actress hired to play a part and shed some tears, Elysian tears, if we could somehow duplicate them. But you can't, and I think you've wasted me on someone who can't help you. He's hopelessly in love with me and would do anything for me, but he's just the captain of one starship, and he's not thinking about Genesis at the moment.
The stooped woman cleared her throat and considered the beautiful Elysian.
Just what is he thinking about?
Kalina sighed and looked at the closed door.
He'll be obsessed with me for some time. His crew will probably notice a change in him. So if there's something you want to get out of this liaison, you had better tell me about it fast, or let me end it. He'll be heartbroken, but he'll live.
The wizened commander began shuffling down the corridor.
Keep going with it. When he awakens, tell him that we'll return the prototype suits and let them risk their lives in that blackness.
After her superior left, she re-entered her quarters and paused in front of the mirror to arrange her hair in the severe Romulan style. The hair was a fraud, just like her. But it didn't matter, because the captain was hers. Even if she told him the truth, he would still love her. She padded softly to her bed, where her lover had not stirred.
I tried to protect you, Jean-Luc. We made a mistake, and I'm sorry. I sold my love too cheaply.
As a tear trickled from her eye, she angrily intercepted the drop with her fingers and wiped it on her tunic. Sometime later, as Jean-Luc Picard blinked awake, he felt drugged, sated, and blissfully happy, though Kaylina was no longer in his arms. He sprang out of bed and wondered how he was going to get back to the Enterprise with the least amount of embarrassment. On her vanity was a comm panel he had seen her use before.
This is Captain Picard. I wish to return to my ship.
A Romulan officer answered.
But of course, Captain. Commander Kaylina is occupied at the moment, and she sends her regrets. An escort will arrive there soon to take you to the transporter room. We will transport the prototype phase suits at the same time.
10 minutes later, when he walked onto the bridge of the Enterprise, he was a bit dismayed to find Beverly Crusher in charge. He tried to keep his demeanor businesslike as he approached her and forced himself to look at meaningless readouts on the empty console.
What's our status, Dr. Crusher?
The same, Captain. We were waiting for you, and now I presume we're going to put those suits to use and go in there. Picard gave her a hearty smile and started toward the door.
Yes, Doctor. The bridge is yours.
As soon as the turbolift doors closed, Picard fought the temptation to tell the computer to take him back to the transporter room. Too much of a good thing, he concluded. You've got to pace yourself. You can't let Kaylina take over your life. As the door to the Sequoia's brig opened, the security officers dragged the unconscious Romulan prisoner inside and tossed him into a cell. Nechayev and Teska glanced at the other prisoner, and the Admiral stepped closer to the young Romulan's cell.
You are going to tell us, one way or another. We will reward you for sparing us all another mind meld. But force us to do a mind meld, and we'll return you to your masters with a note pinned to your chest outlining everything you've told us.
The Romulan youth nodded toward the unconscious prisoner.
And Jarrett?
If you cooperate, we'll return him, but we won't say we learned anything. The young Romulan bowed his head.
I'll go with you.
A minute later, the spy and the Admiral were ensconced in an interrogation room. Nechayev consulted her pad.
All right. What are the names of the Romulan vessels which took portable Genesis devices from Lomar?
The young prisoner finally replied.
There are 4 of them. The Terex, Baltran, Javlik, and Petrask. A portable device was given to each ship.
Nechayev nodded.
And searching Lomar, you found out about the 5th device on Torna 4, and your team was sent there to retrieve it?
Yes. Nechayev glanced at her pad as if she were studying information.
Those 4 ships, which each took a Genesis emitter, where did they go? 2 were recalled to Romulus, and the other 2 were sent to see if the Enterprise had a Genesis device.
The Admiral nodded appreciatively.
You're doing a fine job, son. Let's send out for some food.
Nechayev excused herself and gave orders to her crew. She arranged for a caretaker staff to remain on Lomar and have a conversation that would be picked up by the Romulan listening device. The conversation would make it clear that Starfleet had the missing Genesis emitter. She hoped that the Romulans might then back off, since they would not have a monopoly on the portable devices.
Then she sent a message to the Enterprise and told them what she had learned and immediately set course to rendezvous with Captain Picard's starship. Stepping off the turbolift, not far from her door, Beverly was confronted by Lieutenant Raynor Slevin. "You said I should see you, Doctor, if I had any problems." As the door to her quarters slid open, she looked at Raynor curiously. "What kind of problems?" The Antosian looked at her beseechingly. "May I come in, please?" Beverly motioned him inside. Hesitantly twisting his big hands, Raynor Slevin went on. "It's in the nature of one of those side effects you warned me about. And I've done something bad. I was only trying to help, but it's gotten out of hand." He couldn't look Crusher in the eyes as he told her about visiting Susie Ogawa in the guise of her father. Beverly gasped in true horror. "Slevin, how could you? That's trifling with the emotions of a little girl." The Antosian stared at her, tears welling in his eyes. I thought I was trying to help her. I promise not to do it again." Crusher quickly came to a decision. "I'm going to do you two big favors. First, I'm going to tell Alyssa Ogawa about this myself. You are not to have any more contact with either her or Susie. And the second favor is that I'm going to keep all this quiet for now and let you keep working your shift. But when you're not working, you're restricted to quarters." The Antosian jumped to his feet. "Thank you, Doctor. I'm going back to my quarters right now." Teska walked into the brig and studied the older Romulan, Jarrett, who now sat alone in the row of recessed cells. His younger, more cooperative comrade had been whisked away for his own protection. Jarrett looked up sullenly at her curious and beautiful face. "Care to look at the zoo animal?" "I would like to request a favor. Would you allow our minds to meld?" "I thought we already did that." Teska cocked her head as she composed an answer that wasn't a lie. "A willing, freely given mind meld is a different experience than one performed on a drugged, unwilling subject." "Is it? This is like being asked, was that rape fun? Would you care for another one?" She rose to her feet. "I meant no disrespect. Yes or no would be a sufficient answer." He called after her. "Wait! What would I get out of this?" "I have no idea. I have not discussed this with my superior." Jarrett stared at her. "Would I know everything that's in your mind, too?" "Yes." "You'd better ask your superior about that, and find out what she's offering." A few minutes later, Teska stood in the Chayev's ready room. "I believe I have convinced the prisoner, Jarrett, to meld with me, but you must sweeten the deal." The Admiral sighed. "Tell him that after we return to Federation space, he can go live in the Rigel system, be a Rigelian. We have a special colony where former Romulans are quite happy." Commander Will Riker filled the doorway of the saucer lounge, then strode right to Beverly Crusher's table and sat down. He leaned forward and grimaced. "It's about the captain." Beverly nodded and guessed. "He's gone back to the Javlik?" "Yes, but he is captain of the ship. If she invites him and he accepts, there's not much I can do to stop him from beaming over. We're so buddy-buddy with the Romulans now, it's sickening. We've got the Brahm suits back and we're ready to try them, but it still feels like we're treading water. I get the feeling that something terrible is about to happen." Beverly stirred the melting ice in her tea. "I could put him on medical disability, but what would be my justification? That he has the hots for a Romulan commander?" "Data to Riker. We have just received an urgent message from Admiral Chayev. We are to be advised that the Romulan warbird Javlik is in possession of a portable Genesis emitter. We are to limit contact with the Romulans and treat them with the precautions reserved for hostiles. We are authorized to use deadly force to keep them from escaping.
Riker gazed with concern at Crusher.
We've broken every one of those orders already.
As Riker rose to leave, Beverly also stood up.
I'm coming with you, Will. Maybe he'll listen to me.
As soon as Jean-Luc Picard and Kalina reached her plush quarters on the Javlik, he clawed hungrily at her body. She pushed him off.
Jean-Luc, you must have some patience.
He rushed up behind her and began nuzzling her neck. She pushed him away again.
Jean-Luc, we heard about your secret.
He looked at her in confusion.
My secret? My only secret is that I'm in love with you, and I can't stand being away from you. You're so quaint, Jean-Luc. All I want is honesty from you. You told me that the Federation didn't have a portable Genesis device, but now I learn that you do have one. What does it matter, Kalina? Who has what? As long as we have each other.
He tried to embrace her again, but she slipped out of his grasp and walked to the door.
Don't come back to me, Jean-Luc, until you have it.
As the door shut in his face, Picard knew what he had to do. Teska entered the Sequoia's brig alone. She knelt down in front of Jarrett, the Romulan assassin. They had to be equals.
Jarrett, are you ready to meld with me?
After a few seconds, he looked up and shrugged.
Why not? Come on in, Vulcan priestess. But I warn you that my mind is not a pretty place.
Teska alighted on the bunk beside him and began to massage his neck until he began to relax.
Do not be afraid, Jarrett. I am giving, not taking.
As gently as she could, Teska spread her delicate digits across his left cheekbone, forming a pattern of contacts. Almost immediately, the bloody images and raw sensations rushed into her mind. For a Romulan, Jarrett had not lived a life of privilege. He was born to poverty and low caste, the child of a comfort worker, as they were called. He was raised in a brutal orphanage. He showed a penchant for inflicting violence, and he was taken to a special school. Inflicting pain and death was Jarrett's art. In some respects, his life flowed peacefully with a predictable outcome. Then a shred of jetsam flew past, which Teska had to pluck from the stream. In her hand, the bit became an ugly pool of memory, which she found to be deep and frigid. Yet Teska dove in and swam to the center. Yes, she saw it all, including the one death she could not bear to watch. Hazmek, standing tall and defiant, professing his innocence while professing his love for his Vulcan mate. At that point, Jarrett wrapped a shroud over Teska's eyes and spirited her past the actual scene of Hazmek's death. He died bravely, said the Romulan. The two of them merged and melded their thoughts, dreams, and desires, becoming intimate in a way even lovers dared not. Jarrett's mind was ugly because it was deprived of beauty, and Teska's mind was beautiful but deprived of wildness. At that moment, they awoke. Tears welled in the hardened Romulan's eyes, and he gripped her forearm and wept on her shoulder.
I killed your husband. I'm so sorry.
Teska patted him tenderly on the back.
It was my good fortune that it was you, Jarrett, because now I know Hazmek is indeed dead.
Teska entered the ready room to find Alina Nechayev pacing. The Admiral pointed to a screen that contained an urgent message from Regimal. Regimal and the Ferengi Chelok had gone to rendezvous with Yorka and Cassie Jackson.
They had found no one. But they had retrieved what Regimal described as an invitation. The Admiral walked over to her screen and pressed a panel. "Teska, I want you to hear this part of Regimal's message." Regimal appeared on the screen and read from an ornate document. "On the 7th day of circles, the light will conquer the dark. Good will triumph over evil, and the graveyard of our allies will blossom with life once again. Watch the heavens, for you will experience the wonder of the orb of life. Signed with humility, Vedic Yorka, protector of the orb of life." Regimal looked up with a slight smirk. "His Vedic ship didn't waste much time getting his old job back. We have 2 days. When the transmission ended, Nechayev sat down, speaking her thoughts aloud. 2 days. We've got to stop Yorka from deploying Genesis on a large scale. That means solving the riddle of Yorka's announcement. At the same time, we've got to get our hands on a Genesis emitter to test it and see if it really affects the anomalies. We know that the Javlik has an emitter, but how do we get it from them without destroying the Warbird and the device? And without losing the Sequoia and the Enterprise in the process? Teska stepped forward. "Admiral, we should bring Regimal back. To steal an object from a Romulan Warbird, we need him." The Admiral nodded. "Yes. We will inform the runabout to meet us at the Enterprise's position. I'll bring Captain Picard up to date. Teska, you research the clues in this message. Use as much of the ship's resources as you need." Captain Picard glared at the senior officers gathered in the observation lounge. "Let's recap, shall we? The Romulans think we have a portable Genesis emitter, and we don't. We think they have one, but maybe they don't either. And the only person who for certain has Genesis is this Bajoran monk, Yorka. Only he calls it the Orb of Life, and maybe he's going to replicate it, daisy-chain a number of them, and presumably terraform a place called the Graveyard of our allies, 2 days from now." LaForge lifted his dark eyebrows over his pale implants. "If the Romulans find out about this mass detonation, they'll probably head right there." A slight smile played across Picard's face. "Presuming they can figure out where it is." LaForge continued. "One thing is certain. We need a Genesis emitter to see whether its energy really affects the rifts and the radiation levels." Riker sat forward. "Well, perhaps we should schedule the EVA and the Brahms suits before the Sequoia gets here. After that, we might be in action." Picard rose to his feet. "There won't be an attack on the Javlik. I can talk to her. Picard to bridge. Hail the Javlik for me." "Sorry, Captain. The Javlik continues to ignore our hails." Picard slammed his fist into his palm with frustration. "I am not going to play this ridiculous game. Number 1, go ahead and schedule the EVA using the Brahms suits. And I want a small crew assembled for the captain's yacht. Somewhere out there is a Genesis device, and I'm going to find it." With that, he marched out of the observation lounge without dismissing anyone else. Riker sighed. "Well, let's get busy on that EVA. LaForge, who do you see making the spacewalk?" "Well, I think we only need 2 people. Since time is short, I prefer to have people who have already logged time in the Brahms suit." Deanna Troi smiled at Riker. "Since we need you and Data on the bridge, that leaves me and Geordi to go." Half an hour later, Deanna Troi was inside the bulky suit. She couldn't help but to remember the last time she had worn a Brahms suit, during the awesome destruction of the planet Persephone 5. The only reason she had beamed down during the height of the Genesis wave was to rescue Will and Data. This suit had done the job then, and it would do it again. Geordi LaForge gave her a thumbs up from his own white armor, and the 2 of them stepped awkwardly onto the transporter platform. Instantly, Troy felt the relief of weightlessness when she materialized in the low gravity. A few meters away floated a jet sled, a two-person conveyance with short-range thrusters. Both she and Geordi grabbed a handle. Geordi steered them into the debris field, a glittering ocean of confetti that contained the ruins of 2 starships framed by a massive black curtain. The immense rift made it seem as if they were falling into the blackest, deepest pit in the universe. As they cruised deeper into the debris, it was like riding a real sled through a golden snowstorm, and they sliced a tunnel through the glittering dust. The suits protected them, and so did Geordi's deft steering, but the visibility grew worse with every centimeter. LaForge's voice finally echoed in her ears.
So what do you think?
Troy looked around and couldn't even spot the rift or the Enterprise, thanks to the swirling cloud of debris.
I think the chances of us seeing something in here are pretty remote, Geordi.
Out of nowhere, a shape shot toward them like a torpedo, and Troy ducked as a horribly disfigured humanoid cruised past, his mouth agape and his eyes bulging. It was impossible to say what species he was or what propelled him past the rest of the space junk, but he was certainly dead. Geordi gasped in surprise.
Wow! Should we try to recover the body?
Troy shivered.
Not now. Maybe on our way out. Can we get at the edges of this cloud where we can see what's coming? I don't want to stumble into that rift, and it may have some gravitational pull.
After LaForge shot a few bursts, they were headed in what felt like an upward direction, although no such bearing was possible out here.
Geordi, my radiation readouts are off the scale. Do you think we could even transport out of here?
He didn't answer. He just continued to ride on the other side of the sled. One thickly gloved hand stuck in the handle. Troy pounded him on his shoulder, and he lost his grip and floated away, obviously unconscious. Troy saw a purple starfish-like creature latched onto his faceplate, writhing and twitching. Then she realized that similar creatures littered the debris, grasping desperately with their tentacles. One of them struck a thruster on the sled, and Troy applied fuel and toasted it.
Away, team, to Transporter Room 1. Beam up LaForge immediately. Medical emergency.
There was no response, except that a blackness surged over Troy's mind. Deanna Troi felt a mixture of recognition and repulsion. There was no longer one entity in the rift, but billions and billions, all of them in a mindless stampede, trampling over each other to escape from the burning fires. At Gem World, the overlying motives of the entity were control and revenge. Now it was just a mad yearning for survival. With a start, Deanna realized that the ruling entity of the other dimension was dead, and chaos ruled in its stead. This conclusion brought Troy to full consciousness. She had learned more than she needed to know. The rifts were like cracks in a dam, and when they exploded, there would be a flood of alien life and deadly radiation from one dimension into another. When she realized that she still had control of the sled, she carefully reversed direction and soon had LaForge secured. Then she piloted the sled out of the shimmering cloud and back into view of the Enterprise and Javlik. She hailed the Enterprise.
Transporter Room 2 to being back.
In the engineering section of the Sequoia, Teska walked past a bank of workstations, all devoted to parsing Bajoran history, language, and mythology, trying to find the planet mentioned cryptically in Vedic Yorka's announcement. She glanced over the shoulders of the researchers and saw one word occurring with considerable frequency: Maquis. The Maquis had been a rebellious group of Federation colonists who faced removal from their homes in the demilitarized zone due to an ill-fated treaty with the Cardassians. Battling both the Cardassians and the Federation, they fit the definition of allies to the Bajorans. The demilitarized zone would be an ideal place for Yorka's showcase. So she had her researchers correlate the data with significant events which included the Maquis, with a cross-check on dead planets. After that step, another name began to show up with some frequency on their screens: Solosos 3. Suddenly, Admiral Nechayev strode purposefully into engineering. Teska, Regimal just sent word that he's racked his brain and he thinks that Solosos 3 could be it. A Starfleet effort to capture a Maquis leader made the planet unlivable. Teska nodded. Yes, firing quantum torpedoes with trilithium resin into the atmosphere was effective. But logically, what can we do about an experiment on a dead planet in the demilitarized zone? Nechayev shook her head. Logically, not very much. And Solosos 3 is only an educated guess. But I want to tell the Enterprise. Then I'll get some sleep until we meet up with them. On the Enterprise, Picard strode down the corridor to the hatchway of the yacht, which was stowed under the saucer section. He was taking 3 other crew members, a pilot, and 2 veteran security officers. If Kaylina demanded a quest, some proof of his love, he could fulfill it. He had heard from Admiral Nechayev. Now he had a destination, Solosos 3, and his burning love would furnish the energy. A few moments later, a small, oblong craft took off from the underbelly of the saucer section, streaking away from the 2 gigantic starships and bursting into warp.